Hello, third and fourth grade. Time for our next story in Norse mythology. We are beginning the end. The next series of stories will lead us up to Ragnarok. And today we have the death of Balder. If you recall, Balder was the kind and gentle god. And while other gods all had their mischievous sides or their violent sides, Balder was known for peace and kindness, and the other gods would go to him when they needed that feeling. So, as life on Asgard became busier and busier, there wasn't time for lazing about in the fields. And the work of the gods was so great because the population on Midgard grew. So they were always busy helping the people of Midgard. Thor was constantly battling the Jotuns, and there just wasn't time for them to laze. Balder was the only one who did not change during all of this. His peace and kindness was a constant for the gods. But as life became busier and busier, Balder began to be haunted by bad dreams. And Odin was particularly worried about this, thinking that there was some foreboding, and he took it upon himself to visit the grave of a Volva, which is a wise woman who had been dead for quite a while. He needed to know what Balder's nightmares were about. Well, when Odin went to visit the Volva, he sang a magic chant, and her ghost rose, moaning and groaning from the hollow ground. And wearily she spoke that Balder's days were numbered. Hel has already prepared a seat for him in her dark world. And then she sank back into her grave after that message. Well, with a sad heart, Odin rode home to Asgard and told the Aesir that there was nothing that they could do. Balder would soon be leaving for Hel. But Frigg, who was Balder's mother, could not accept this and refused to give up hope. And she went out into the world and made all things living and lifeless to promise not to harm her Balder. So water, fire, stones, metals, diseases, plants, trees, and animals all gave their pledges to Frigg not to harm Balder. Now she thought nothing evil could happen. Well, the Aesir were really confused about all of this. So they thought, well, okay, well, I guess we can playfully try to destroy Balder and nothing can happen. So they made a ring around Balder, just like a circle, and pelted him with pebbles and rocks and spears and axes, and they even shot arrows at him, but no harm could come to Balder. It was a marvelous game, and the Aesir laughed and enjoyed themselves. Well, Loki was, of course, very jealous, and evil gnawed at his heart watching all of this. He sneaked away and disguised himself as an old crone, so a very old woman. And then, disguised as this old crone, he approached Frigg. Oh, how wonderfully well you have protected your son Balder. But are you sure that everything in the world promised not to harm him? I am quite sure, said Frigg. Well, everything except the small mistletoe. It is so small and soft. I did not have it bothered to take the oath. Loki crept away, thinking that this would be Balder's undoing. So he quickly found a mistletoe, and he made it into a sharp arrow. Then he approached Hod, If you recall, Hod was one of Odin's sons and Balder's blind brother. And Loki approached him and had him take a turn with an arrow to point at Balder. And he put the mistletoe arrow into the bow and helped Hod to point the arrow at Balder. When he pulled the string, instead of hearing that dull thud as it hit Balder, it pierced him and down he fell. Right. In horror, the Aesir turned and they stared at Hod, who was again standing by himself because Loki had disappeared quickly. Their arms fell limply to their sides and everyone wept. How could their world survive without gentle Balder? At last the Aesir pulled themselves together and began to prepare a stately funeral for Balder aboard his great ship. With their heads bowed low, they carried him down to the shore where the ship lay beached. All the gods and goddesses and the elves and dwarves and even some trolls and Jotuns came to bid Balder a last farewell. Only Loki was nowhere to be seen. They built a pyre under the mast, which is, like that large fire, and covered it with Balder's treasures. And when they tried to launch the ship, it stood as if it were nailed to the ground. No one could budge it, not even Thor. They had to send to Jotunheim for the ogress Hyrrokin. She came at once riding on a wild wolf with a serpent for a bridle. She gave the ship such a hard shove that sparks flew from the rollers and all the land trembled. Once the ship was afloat, Balder's body was placed on the pyre. When Nanna, his wife, saw this, her heart broke and she immediately died. She could not live without her Balder. So the Aesir sadly laid her down right beside her husband's side. Then Odin took off his golden armlet and put it on Balder's chest as a parting gift, and then he lit the pyre. Thor swung his hammer 3 times over the fire and blessed it. The ropes were cut and the flaming ship drifted out to sea, with Odin's black ravens fluttering about the mast. Aegir's daughters tossed high their white scarves of sea foam, and everyone wept for Balder as the ship sank down to hell. Odin's sorrow was great, but Frigg's was greater still, for she blamed herself. Why had she neglected the weak mistletoe? And was there no way to undo the carelessness? Who wants to win my everlasting love? She asked the sons of Odin. Who dares to travel the dark road to hell and beg her to let Balder return? Odin's son Hermod, who had great courage, stepped forward and said that he would travel the road to hell. So they saddled Odin's horse, slept near for him, and he galloped away. For 9 days and nights he rode across the dismal swamps and through the haunted valleys. On the 9th night he came to the bridge, paved with gold, which spanned an icy river coming from Niflheim. It was a bridge that only dead men on their way to hell must cross. But without fear, Hermod darted across it. But its guardian, a giantess sitting on the other bank, challenged him. Who makes my bridge ring so loudly? She cried. 100 dead horsemen make less din than you. You are not a dead man. The color of your cheeks gives you away. And she rose to stop him. I am Hermod, son of Odin. I am on my way to hell to seek my brother Balder. Pass then, said the giantess. I saw your fair brother crossing the bridge. The way to hell is down and north, she added, pointing the way. For even she was grieving for Balder. Hermod followed the road, which soon led to the gate of Hell's realm. And there, the fearful dog, Garm, stood gnarling and straining at its leash. But Hermod spurred his horse and Sleipnir leapt high over the gate. At the doorstep, he dismounted and walked into Hell. Stony-faced and dreadful to behold, Hel sat on her throne. Across from her sat Balder with Nanna at his side. She had a wreath of wilted flowers on her head, and a horn of sweet mead stood before them. untouched. They sat without stirring, as if in a dream. Hermod greeted Hel and began to speak. For a whole night, he pleaded with her to let Balder go. He told her how much the Aesir grieved over their loss, and how all of nature was weeping for Balder. At last she rose from her throne, and the gold that entwined her huge body flared like flames as she spoke. If it be true that Balder is so loved, and that all things living in lifeless weep for him, I will let him return to the living. But if there is one thing that does not weep for him, then he must remain with me, she said. Hermod prepared to leave, and Balder rose and led him through the door. He thanked Hermod for coming such a long way. Then he gave him Draupnir, the golden armlet, and asked him to take it back to Odin, because only the living needed to have gold. Hermod rode back to Asgard as fast as Sleipnir could carry him, and Hel's words brought new hope to the Aesir. They had no doubt that all things in the world would join them in weeping for Balder, and Frigg at once sent messengers to tell all the things to weep for Balder. And then he could return. Every creature and everything wept. Men, women, beasts, birds, trees, flowers, stones, metals, everything, living and lifeless, shed tears for Balder. But as the messengers were returning to Asgard, they came upon an old crone sitting underneath a tree. When asked to weep, she refused to shed a single tear, but instead rasped, "Never has Balder done anything for me. Let Hel keep what she has." She called herself Thok, but we know that it was really Loki in disguise. And so Balder had to remain in the dark realm of Hel. And there he was soon joined by Hod, for after the rules of the Aesir, life must be paid with life. Vali's youngest son, Vali, Odin's youngest son, avenged Balder's death and sent Hod to Hel.